Once again, this is 416. All right, let's talk about structure. Once again, you can probably hear my dog barking out there. We'll check in on her later. What I'm talking about when I talk about structure is not necessarily a template, a sort of a fill-in-the-blank chart where you fill in the point of attack and so on. You start out with a story, and a story is essentially a string of events and things that happened. So you pick out which pieces of the story are the most essential, and you leave everything else out, and you emphasize certain things, and you order it in just a particular way, all to increase the engagement and the tension that the audience feels. And through this storytelling process emerges structure. And in the simplest sense, all this structure is a beginning, a middle, and an end. And this roughly translates to 3 acts, Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. As we learn more and more concepts, you'll see this sort of pattern of 3 happen again and again. For instance, with preparation and aftermath, there's a 3-act structure in which the first part is about the preparation for an event, the middle part is about the event itself, and the third part is about the aftermath, understanding the meaning of the event. So these 3 beat before, during, and after patterns will recur. Now we go further. After breaking a screenplay into 3 parts, we then break it into 8 sequences. And each of these sequences is between 8 and 15 minutes long, sometimes as long as 20. And they're essentially stories within stories, units within the larger story that are bound by their own particular attention. Now these 8 sequences give rise to 5 plot points. And we'll go over these more in their own individual videos. But for now, know that they are the point of attack, the place where a character's ordinary world is first interrupted by the circumstances of the story. We have the first act break, and that is the moment where the protagonist or protagonists are locked into the story. There's no going back, and the main tension of the story is established. There's the first culmination, which happens around the midpoint, but it isn't quite the midpoint almost ever. We'll talk more about that later. Of all the plot points, that's the most complicated. The second culmination is the end of the second act, and it's fairly straightforward because there is a main tension that covers the entire second act, and that will be resolved one way or the other by the end of the second act and lead to a third act. And somewhere in the final sequence of the movie is going to be the climax. Now, each of these sequences, as we shall see, has sort of its own personality. The third sequence is often called the fun and game sequence because it's the sequence where the premise of the movie first plays out and people can see, for the first time whether, the premise is going to be really funny or really scary or really whatever it's supposed to be. Fifth sequence is one of the most interesting ones to me because it's often one that takes a break from the main tension. It's a romantic interlude or it's a road trip somewhere else, but it's unlike any other sequence in the second act. But again, we'll go over each of these sequences and their characteristics in more detail as the semester goes on. Now, with each of these sequences, we can kind of zoom in and look at them individually. And as stories within stories, they also have their own tension, their own objective, their own protagonist, and so they'll have their own structure and their own plot points specific to the sequence itself. Subplots as well have their own 3-part structure with 8 beats spread out over the course of the second act. And within the sequence, which is built of scenes, the scenes themselves, as we shall see, have their own kind of structure. Even when they're just dialogue scenes, 2 people sitting in a room going back and forth, or sitting in a car going back and forth, like the opening of Lady Bird, which we'll break down. They have a very particular structure. And the structure, again, emerges by how the story is told. Scenes are often very distilled, having only just the most important elements left in them. And dialogue is often incredibly distilled, where you only get the minimum number of words absolutely necessary to relate whatever it is a character is trying to relate. It's not natural in that way. But that honing down and cutting away of everything that is inessential with the purpose of engaging an audience and creating tension and making sure that the big moment of the scene or the big moment of the sequence or the big moment of the story has emotional impact means that these kinds of structures arise. What do you think, Luna? Am I going too fast? Are these videos too rushed? What do you think?
Oh, sweet puppy.
So let's slow down. This is the template that I'm talking about when I talk about structure. 3 acts, 8 sequences, and these 5 plot points. If you know this, you'll know essentially the foundation of all the structural references I make throughout the rest of the class. Now, on the one hand, this is very important, and it's been with us since Aristotle. On the other hand, I don't want you to take structural templates and maps too seriously. You can think of them as like a drawing of a human face, a very simple map of a human face. Yes, it shows us 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, and 2 ears, but the most interesting people are very specific, and the most interesting stories are very specific. So don't mistake the map for the actual territory, because the territory is going to always look different. So that's structure, and that's my dog, and that's all I have until the next video where we talk about plant and payoff.